The desert night in Arizona, 1885, held a deathly stillness that even seasoned riders felt in their bones. Luke Mercer guided his horse through a narrow canyon, the reins loose in one hand while the other hovered near his holster. The cold air bit at his cheeks, carrying with it a strange tension that made the shadows seem heavier than usual. Luke had spent years riding these rugged trails, long enough to believe nothing could surprise him anymore. But that night proved him wrong. As he followed the moonlit path, a pair of tiny shapes huddled beneath a collapsed mesquite tree caught his eye. Luke slowed his horse to a halt, narrowing his gaze. At first, he thought the shapes were animals, or maybe tricks of exhaustion playing with the edges of his vision. But then, barely audible over the whisper of wind, a soft, broken sob drifted through the canyon. A child's sob. Luke's chest tightened. He swung off his horse, boots crunching softly in the cold sand. Moving slowly, careful not to startle whatever or whoever lay beneath the tree, he approached with steady steps. The moonlight slid across the trembling silhouettes, revealing the truth he had not expected. Two little Apache girls, no more than 7 or 8 years old, their tiny bodies shaking from cold and fear. They pressed close together, their eyes wide and shining with terror. Luke crouched a few feet away, keeping his hands visible, his voice a gentle murmur even as shock flickered through him. "It's all right," he said softly. "I ain't here to hurt you." The girls didn't answer. They only clung tighter to each other. Their clothes were torn and dusty, streaked with dried tears and sand. Their bare feet were scratched and bleeding from running over rocks in the dark. They looked half-starved, half-frozen, and wholly terrified. Luke felt something gritty turn inside his chest. Slowly, he reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a thick wool blanket. He approached inch by inch, letting them see every movement, and finally draped it over their frail shoulders. They flinched at first, instinctively bracing for pain. But when none came, when all they felt was warmth, they eased just slightly. One girl hid her face. The other stared at Luke with trembling desperation, as if trying to decide whether he was enemy or salvation. Luke slipped off his coat and wrapped it around both girls, careful not to startle them. He lifted them gently, one so light he feared she might break, and placed them on his horse. After securing them between his arms, he clicked his tongue and set off toward a safer place. As he rode, Luke kept glancing at them, checking for breath, watching for signs of worsening cold. The moon washed the canyon in silver, casting long, ghost-like shadows along the walls. Every sound felt amplified, the wind, the distant howl of coyotes, the faint shiver of the girls. Where had they come from? Who had scared them into the desert? And more urgent, how many others were still in danger? Luke's gut twisted with questions he couldn't answer. He found a small clearing sheltered by tall rocks and quickly built a fire. The flames danced, sending warm light toward the girls. They sat close, huddled and silent, still too frightened to speak. Luke offered them water in a tin cup, and after hesitating, they drank with shaking hands. He didn't push them. Trauma didn't respond to questions. Trauma waited for safety. Luke spent the night awake, rifle within reach, eyes scanning the dark while the girls drifted in and out of restless sleep. Their small forms reminded him of frightened birds trying to weather a storm far too big for them. As dawn crept across the desert, painting the rocks gold and rose, Luke guided his horse toward an old abandoned trading post he had used for shelter in the past. Once inside, he set the girls on a broken bench, dusted it clean, and gave them softened biscuits. They ate slowly, like children who weren't used to food arriving without fear attached. Finally, after long silence, the older one spoke in a trembling whisper. Their camp had been attacked. Fire, screams, chaos. Their mother pushed them away, begging them to run. They had obeyed, but they never saw her again. Luke listened without interrupting, fists curling with quiet fury. He had witnessed frontier brutality before, but hearing it through the quivering voice of a child added a fresh ache. He placed a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder and promised he would keep them safe until he found their people. It wasn't a promise made lightly. It was a vow. He had just stood to plan his next move when something shifted in the light outside. A shadow. Tall. Motionless. Framed by the bleeding edge of morning sun. Luke's hand went to his holster, but before he could draw, the girls gasped. Their wide eyes filled not with fear but sudden, explosive hope. Nenana. Tala. The girls bolted, sprinting across the dusty floor toward the doorway. Standing there, breath ragged and eyes burning with emotion, was a woman Luke had never seen in his life, and yet something in him reacted instantly. She dropped to her knees, arms outstretched, and the girls collided into her with sobs. She gathered them close, whispering in Apache, her words thick with relief, grief, and fierce love. Luke stepped back, giving them space. But he watched her, unable not to. She was tall and strong, her long braid falling over her shoulder, her clothes dusty from travel yet carrying unmistakable dignity. Her face was striking, sharp cheekbones softened by tears, fierce eyes clouded with exhaustion, and a presence that felt both resilient and heartbreakingly human. After a long moment, she rose, keeping her sisters close as she faced Luke. Her eyes met his. Fire first, wary, protective, ready to fight if she must. Then slowly, warmth, gratitude. She noticed the coat around her sisters, the blanket, the food crumbs. She noticed Luke's posture, respectful distance, hands open at his sides, no threat anywhere in him. She placed a hand over her heart. "My name is Ayla," she said, voice steady but trembling with leftover fear. "They are my sisters." Luke introduced himself. His name felt strangely small beside hers. Ayla bowed her head. "You saved them," she whispered. "You saved what is left of my family." Luke swallowed hard. He tried to shrug off the praise, but Ayla shook her head. "Many would not have helped two Apache children," she said quietly. The truth stung him more than it should have. She stepped closer, studying him as if trying to understand the kind of man who would risk himself for children not his own. Luke held her gaze, unexpectedly unable to look away. Ayla's presence struck him like a gust of warm wind in winter. She carried sorrow in her bones yet stood like someone born to protect, to endure, to rise again and again despite heartbreak. In her eyes, Luke saw something he hadn't felt in years. A pull. A spark. A shift deep enough to shake the foundations of the quiet life he had built. Ayla touched her sister's head softly before looking back at him. Her expression, grateful and tender, felt like it reached straight through Luke's ribs. In that moment, Luke Mercer understood something he hadn't planned to learn. Saving the girls had been instinct. But meeting Ayla. That felt like destiny. And destiny, he knew, didn't come quietly.